Hey friends, it's Jasmine. I hope that you all are doing well. If you're new to my channel, welcome. I am a witchy content creator here on YouTube. I make content pretty much exclusively about witchcraft and my personal practice, as well as Covenry related content. If that sounds like something that you're interested in, feel free to check out some of the other videos on my channel. And if you are a returning subscriber, it's good to see you back. It's good to see you again. I hope that you've been well. And yeah, I really appreciate all of your support. When you like or engage with the video or subscribe to the channel or the Patreon, it really helps keep this going. And so I just want to take a minute to say like, hey, thank you. I appreciate it. One of the things that I like to do here on my channel is book reviews. I think that as witches, one of the fundamental pillars, quite literally, in our practice should be looking at the witch's pyramid, that first pillar, that to know, keeping the element of air, keeping your knowledge, and keeping your mental sword and your mind sharp. I think that witchcraft as a practice is ever evolving, and I think that it's wise for us to continue reading, regardless of if you're brand new to the craft or if you've been practicing for 6 weeks, 6 months, or 6 years. I think that the minute we stop learning and reading and growing is the minute that our practice becomes stagnant, and that magic then can die. So I think it's really important that we make it a mission for ourselves as witches to keep our swords sharp, and to keep that commitment to the first pillar of the witch's pyramid. So the book that I'm going to be reviewing today is Southern Cunning, and this is by Oberon. I hope that I'm pronouncing your name correctly. So this little book is available on Amazon. I think I paid maybe like $15 or $16 for it. So price-wise, I would say this is fairly accessible. I believe it is on Amazon Prime, so you can get it in a couple of days. I'm sure there are other places that are definitely more ethical than Amazon that you can buy this at. That's just where I bought it. I know it's terrible. I don't necessarily like condone or support Amazon, but sometimes it's just so convenient. And this book is also roughly around, I think, 150 pages. So lengthwise, I feel like this is a really simple and easy sort of read. I also really appreciate Erin's writer's sort of author voice in this book, because the way that Erin writes, it's extremely approachable. This is an author that I feel like if you read this work, you're not necessarily going to feel like you're reading some sort of like heavy text. You're going to feel like you're sitting across from like a familiar or friend, and having a discussion about their practice and about folk magic, which I really like that style of writing. I find that very easy to engage with and also absorb the information. As someone who's kind of a bit neurospicy, sometimes when things and books are written so heavy, like textually, it can be a little bit hard for me to be able to actually retain the information. Like, and I don't know if any of you can relate to that, where you read something and it's like you read a whole chapter and then you think like, okay, what did I retain from that? And there's like almost nothing up there. So sometimes I will also kind of like write notes as I read, which I do have some notes here on my computer that I probably will be looking at during this video. And then also as a bonus, so I am part of the Indie Witches Book Club, which I've talked about it before here on the channel. I will put it somewhere here, but the Indie Witches Book Club is mostly a Facebook group. So if you're on Facebook and if you're interested in joining a witchy book club, it's completely free. All you need to do is just join the book club. We do have online and in-person meetups to go over the books that are selected by the community. So how it basically works is 1 month the discussion will be online, the next month it'll be in person. There's really 6 meetups a year, but there's 12 meetings. Half of them are online, half of them are in person. So 6 books get chosen a year to be the community choice book club pick. And like The books will be put up in the group. Everyone can vote on them. And the book that has the most votes is the book that wins. And basically we have that for about 2 months. So if you're not able to make it to the in-person meetup, like if you don't live close or you just don't feel like driving, or maybe you're in a totally different country, feel free to join the online meetup. That information will be announced in the group. And then you can normally just join like a Zoom call where we discuss the book. It's kind of convenient because I wanted to read this book anyway, like it was kind of on my list to read. I've been hearing Oberon's name sort of around the occult literature sort of community, and I hadn't read any of their stuff, so I really wanted to check out their work. And Southern Cunning especially sort of piqued my interest. I love folk magic. Like, while I'm definitely a ceremonial magic girly, I'm also a folk magic girly too. Like, I feel that a well-rounded practice is a good mix of both. And I love the kind of hands-on approach that folk magic lends to. It's flexible and it's mutable. And while I do love ritual and invocations and ceremony, I don't always think it's necessary for everything every day. I've talked about this before as well, but I definitely like ceremonial ritual for, more like Sabbats or high astrological holy days to mark the changing of seasons or the passing of time. But in my day-to-day life, ceremonial magic really is not the key factor. It's a lot of folk magic that carries my practice day to day. So I'm going to read you a little bit of the back of the book here. Southern Cunning is a journey through the folklore of the American South and a look through the power that these stories hold for modern witches. Through the lens of folklore, animism, and bioregionalism, the book shows how to bring rituals and folklore into the modern day and presents a uniquely American approach to the witchcraft born out of the land and practical application. So yeah, that all sounded really, really good to me. I definitely identify as an animist, kind of feeling the vibe from every rock,
tree, and creature has a life, has a spirit, has a name.
Like animism, definitely, I vibe with that. And practicality in witchcraft, also great. Like I said, not everything needs to be a big, elaborate, grandiose sort of ceremonial ritual. And I think that this is also very approachable for beginners in the craft. I think that if you are new to witchcraft, sort of getting yourself secure in your own folk practice, whether that be the folk practice of your ancestors or culture, or the folk practice of the land that you live and reside on, I think that's very important. And working with bioregional magic, the animals that are native to your area. For us, we look at the white-tailed deer and their antlers when they shed, and that can give us signs and omens and symbols of the changing of seasons and the divine mysteries that are connected to those deer. Also, the plant life. Look at the trees and the shrubs and things growing in your area. I know that I have an iPhone, so I don't know if this applies to Androids, like if they have this option, but iPhone, at least the later iPhones, have a feature where if you take a picture of a plant, you can go to the details of that picture. And there is a plant identification tool inside of the details there. And if you click on that, it'll tell you a little bit about that plant and its scientific name. And then you can take that scientific name and fall down the rabbit hole on Google about magical correspondences and really see what sort of magic is growing in your local area. I think that's really important for us as witches, and especially us as American witches, connecting with the land that we are living on and weaving with magic that's right here without having to necessarily do these big invocations and bringing magic from other lands that we are not living on. I'm going to read you from the table of contents of this book. So we have the acknowledgements, and then we have searching for witchcraft in the stories of the South, omens, dreams, divination, and languages of the spirits. Then we have protections, Bible and church magic, witch balls, the cost of cursing, initiation by spirit in the American South, making the crossroads, call of the familiar, ghosts in the land meeting nature spirits in the South, hi-ho, through the keyhole I go, devil's wife, a note on UPG, following spirit and self-disclosure, Death and Ancestors, The Witch Father of Southern Cunning, Closing Thoughts, and a Tool Index. Well, I am not a witch that resides in the American South. However, I am a witch that does live in the USA. I live in Indiana, Indianapolis, which we kind of border a lot of different magical currents. We have like the Great Lakes region and also the Appalachians that kind of are our neighbors. And so we get a lot of runoff from there. Indiana, specifically Indianapolis, is known as the crossroads of America. If you look at our flag, we literally have a torch on our flag. Like, there's so much mysticism and like witchy correspondence from our area that we have. But I really love learning about just witchcraft through a wider lens, specifically in the Americas. And so if you're interested in that, I would highly recommend checking out this book. One of the things that stuck out to me when reading this book is when Aaron talks about their experience sitting through some really like hateful and kind of triggering anti-LGBT narratives in church growing up and dealing with Abrahamic trauma, while also using the Book of Psalms, which we all know is just a spell book, and church magic in their witchcraft practice, which I don't necessarily have Abrahamic trauma in that sense. I was not raised in a Christian church in any way. However, I think that using blasphemy, whether it be against your sort of immediate religious culture, like your family's religious culture, or whether it be society, I think that's really powerful in witchcraft. And so the whole portion in here talking about like black baptisms and blasphemy, I thought was really cool, like using dirt from the churchyard. Not something that I'm terribly unfamiliar with, but I enjoyed hearing this witch's take on using blasphemy and sort of Christian aspects in your witchcraft practice, and how that can be an act of reclaiming, whether you have immediate religious trauma or you're just suffering under late stage capitalism and the patriarchy like the rest of us here in the States. So I absolutely loved the portion of this book on witch balls. And like where I live, we call witch balls those like little spiky brown seed pods that fall from the tree. We use those oftentimes in like a lot of protection work or even Malefica. And I have always called those witch balls. So I kind of had this sort of preconceived notion, I think, going to that chapter that it was going to be about those. But I was so wrong and also delighted because it gave me a whole new use to that term witch balls. So basically, the witch balls that Aaron references in this book are made by a group of witches. So if you are in a coven, this could be a really fun coven bonding experience. If you're not in a coven though, I feel like you could probably do this with a handful of like your close witchy friends. And the witch balls are essentially made out of either animal fat or wax. And every witch basically brings a ingredient. So one witch might bring broken glass, another witch might bring sulfur, another witch might bring red pepper flakes. Each witch brings an ingredient to the pot along with a little bit of their own hair. And that's all thrown into the wax. And this is kind of cooked in like a double boiler method. So you have like a big pot of water and then you have a smaller pot that you kind of melt everything in. And it's a gentler way to kind of emulsify everything together. So you throw all the ingredients into the wax and you let that kind of all stew together. And then you essentially pour it out into like little silicone molds. And then there's divination that can be done for deciding what witch gets how many witch balls, essentially. So there's kind of, I guess, this folkloric idea that the devil would gift witches witch balls in order to work and weave protection or Malefica for that coming year. So if you got 6 witches balls from the devil, then you have 6 opportunities to weave Malefica blessed by the devil's hand. Love that. absolutely love that. And the fact that they're made out of fat or wax also means that they are going to react to heat. So if you throw them on top of a business's roof or a person's house, like the roof of their house, they're going to melt. And as the ball melts, so does like the magic. I'm sure you can find other uses for them as well. Maybe you can be even more bold and direct and throw it at someone directly. That was probably one of my favorite parts of this book, though, was reading that witch ball chapter. I won't go into too much details about like the specifics of the entire book because I want you to check this book out yourself. But I will say that I really liked the portion on the witch bone as well, which it's interesting because there was kind of a folkloric ritual that was detailed here, and it sparked some very interesting conversations in our book club meetup. So in the folkloric ritual, it talks about a witch essentially boiling a cat
alive
in a pot, and then basically doing that until you get everything off of the bones, and then letting the water wash all of that off the bones. And like when the devil appears at the river or the lake or whatever, that is supposed to be like your bone from the cat. Now, there's also some alternatives that Oberon puts into the book as well. And I think it's important to remember that when we are looking at some folkloric rituals, those do not always like apply literally. And also, even if we are looking at actual historic rituals, that does not necessarily mean that as witches living today in this era, we are going to be able to perform rituals that were performed 100 or even several hundred years ago or more, because we're living in today's world. You know, they're sacrificing dogs to Hecate probably is not going to be super cool in the modern era in most places. You can take a look at the book like the Picatrix or the Gayat al-Hakim, for example, and see where there's a lot of ingredients like blood from the neck of a wild donkey or innards from a white snake. Like there's going to be things that maybe I'm not going to be able to even access based off of the land that I live on. Where am I going to find a wild donkey? I mean, that would involve me trespassing for one, and also I'm pretty sure that might even be labeled as just animal cruelty to go up and just harvest blood like that from someone's livestock. I don't know. I just feel like that might be
illegal.
But anyway, in the book, Oberon does mention some other alternatives and also talks about using the witch's bone in a practical sense, which you'll have to read the book to get that information. But I hope that you guys would check this book out because I really enjoy it. I thought that it was accessible, it was affordable, it was approachable, and those are the three main things I look for when recommending books. I often get people who hit me up, whether it be online or in person, asking like, you know, what books should I look into to get started in witchcraft? And those are the things that I kind of think about, like, is this book approachable? Is this book affordable? Overall, I would probably have to give this book probably a 7 or an 8 out of 10. I definitely enjoyed it. I will definitely proudly be putting it on my bookshelf here. I enjoyed it. I do wish that the book was a little bit longer, but that's not a bad thing. Like that just means that I enjoyed it so much I wish there was more. But I do think that keeping it less than 150 pages really kept it approachable, because sometimes it can be a little daunting to be like, oh gosh, I gotta read like a 500 page or 400 page book. Like I get it. That can be like a little daunting sometimes. And when I am in like my ADHD hyperfixation mode, I can blow through a 300 or 400 page book easily. But when my hyperfixation is on other things than reading, it's almost impossible to get through the book. Yes, overall, I think it's a wonderful book. I think it's very approachable. I think it does very much what it says it's going to give you on like the back, on like the summary of giving you like a practical guide to folk magic of the American South. I think it delivered that. And I think it's a book that's accessible and good for beginners, but I also think that it's very enriching for witches that have maybe already been practicing for several years or even several decades. I still think that a witch could read this and get something out of it, even if you don't even live in the States, just learning more about that specific branch of craft, witchcraft in the American South. Yes, yes. Please let me know if you end up checking this book out. And if you have already read it, I would love to know your thoughts. This video is purely just from my own interest in this book. I'm not sponsored or paid in any way to do this review. I just like doing these book reviews. If you have any suggestions for books that you would like to see me review, I would love those suggestions. And I love all your comments as always down below. So I appreciate all the love and support. Like this video if you like it, subscribe to the channel if you want to, check out my links and my Patreon if you feel called to. And I think that's gonna be a wrap for this video. So thank you guys so much. Blessed be, and I will see you all in hell.